Kale, please! I'm innocent! Please don't do this!
There are two moments that define a life. The moment it falls apart.
You gave me everything. You're my entire world.
And the moment it begins again. But we're getting ahead of ourselves in this story of love and betrayal. Let's start at the beginning. The iron doors of the council chamber slammed open with a force that shook dust from the ancient stone walls. Arya stumbled forward, her wrists bound in silver chains that burned against her skin. The metal seared into her flesh, a cruel reminder that even as Luna Queen of New Moon City, she was still subject to the laws that governed their kind. "Bring the accused forward," commanded a voice that once whispered love into her ear during moonlit nights. Alpha Kale Hale sat at the head of the circular table, his face carved from granite, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Around him sat the Council of Elders of the First Blood, 12 ancient wolves whose combined age spanned centuries, whose judgment was absolute. Arya's bare feet scraped against the cold marble as the guards pushed her toward the center of the room. Her hair hung in tangled waves around her face, still damp from the dungeon where they'd kept her for 3 days without explanation. 3 days of silence, of wondering what crime she'd committed to deserve such treatment. Then she saw her. Lilith sat in the corner, draped in silk the color of fresh blood, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Her stepsister's eyes glittered with something Arya had never seen before, something that made her blood run cold. Triumph. "The charges," Elder Varric began, his voice like gravel grinding against bone, "are most severe. Attempted murder of a blood relative. Poisoning with intent to kill both mother and unborn child. High treason against the crown." The words hit Arya like physical blows. "What? No, I never." Silence. Kale's fist crashed against the table and Arya flinched. This wasn't the man she'd married 5 years ago. This wasn't the alpha who'd promised to stand by her through everything. "You will speak only when given permission." Lilith rose gracefully, her hand still cradling her belly in an exaggerated gesture of protection. When had her stepsister become such a skilled actress? "I know it's hard to believe," Lilith said, her voice trembling with perfectly practiced sorrow. "Arya has been like a mother to me since my parents died. She took me in, loved me, raised me as her own sister. But lately she's been different. Angry. Jealous. Lies," Arya whispered, but the word came out broken, desperate. "The tea she gave me yesterday," Lilith continued, tears now streaming down her face. "I felt it immediately, the burning in my throat, the cramping in my stomach. If I hadn't called for the healers when I did, if they hadn't purged the poison from my system." She paused for dramatic effect, looking around the room at the stern faces of the elders. "Both I and the heir I carry would be dead." The heir. The words hung in the air like a noose. Arya's eyes flew to Kale, searching for some sign that he didn't believe this insanity, but his jaw was set, his gaze fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. "Is it true?" The question escaped Arya's lips before she could stop it. "Kale, is it true? The child, is it yours?" Finally, his eyes met hers and in them she saw the answer. Guilt, defiance and something else, relief perhaps that the secret was finally out. If you're already hooked on this sizzling drama, don't hesitate to hit like and subscribe for more fantasy stories like this, so you'll be the first to know when another drops. And please leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now let's dive back in. "How long?" Arya's voice cracked. "How long have you been sleeping with my sister?" 3 months. Lilith answered for him, her voice no longer sorrowful but sharp as a blade. "Since the night you came back from Dr. Harrison's office crying about another failed fertility treatment. Kale needed comfort and you were too wrapped up in your own failures to provide it." The chamber spun. 8 months. While she'd been visiting specialists, tracking ovulation cycles, injecting herself with hormones that made her sick and emotional, her husband had been seeking comfort in her sister's bed. Her sister, who she'd raised since she was 14, who she'd loved like her own blood. "The evidence is clear," Elder Mordecai announced. "The healers found traces of wolfsbane and nightshade in Lady Lilith's system, the same herbs that were discovered in the Luna's private chambers. They were planted." Arya shouted, lunging forward despite the chains. The guards grabbed her arms, forcing her back. "Can't you see what she's doing? She's lying to take my place, to become Luna herself." "Enough." Kale stood and the room fell silent. He was magnificent in his rage, all-powerful alpha male, and once upon a time, Arya would have found his strength beautiful. Now it was just another weapon turned against her. The council will vote. Those in favor of execution for high treason and attempted murder, raise your hands. Arya watched in horror as 3 hands rose. Those in favor of exile, permanent banishment from New Moon City and all allied territories. 5 more hands. And those in favor of enslavement, to be sold to our enemies as reparation for crimes against the crown. The remaining 4 hands rose, including Kale's. The majority has chosen exile, Elder Varric began, but Kale interrupted. As Alpha King, I invoke my right to choose the punishment. His voice was cold, empty of any emotion. Arya Hale, you are hereby stripped of your title as Luna Queen. I reject you as my mate. You will be sold as a slave to the South Pack, delivered to Alpha Darius Blackthorn as a gift to strengthen the peace treaty between our territories. The room erupted in whispers. The South Pack. Alpha Darius. The cursed king. The monster who killed his own concubines through childbirth, whose lands were ruled by fear and dark magic. It was a death sentence disguised as mercy. The alpha of all alphas. While his lineage faced threat, his strength and power could never be questioned. Tales of his conquest made grown men shudder. Not even the lowest Omega in his pack fell easily. Kale, please. Arya's pride shattered completely as she fell to her knees, chains rattling. Please don't do this. I'm your wife. I'm innocent. I swear on the moon goddess herself I never tried to hurt Lilith. I never tried to hurt anyone. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Doubt maybe. Regret. But then Lilith moved to his side, placing her hand in his, and whatever humanity had surfaced disappeared. Take her away, Kale commanded. I want her gone before nightfall. As the guards dragged Arya from the chamber, she caught Lilith's eye one last time. Her stepsister smiled, a cold, victorious curve of lips, and mouthed 2 words, thank you. The journey to the South Pack took 3 days in a cage barely large enough for Arya to sit upright. They fed her scraps, gave her water once a day, and the guards made crude jokes about what Alpha Darius would do to a failed queen, a barren woman who couldn't even seduce her own husband. On the second night, as the convoy stopped to make camp, Arya allowed herself to remember. Not the betrayal, not the council chamber, but before. The beginning. 5 years ago, the hospital visits had just started. Kale had been patient then, understanding. Don't worry, he'd whispered against her hair after another negative pregnancy test. We have time. These things happen. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The council grew impatient. Whispers started in the corridors about the Luna's failure, about whether the moon goddess had blessed their union at all. With each passing month, each failed treatment, each doctor's appointment that ended in tears, Kale had grown more distant. She should have seen it coming. Should have noticed how Lilith started wearing perfume that matched Kale's cologne, how her stepsister's dresses became tighter, more revealing. How Lilith always seemed to be there when Kale needed something and Arya was too exhausted, too emotionally drained to be the perfect supportive wife. The last hospital visit had been the worst. Dr. Zucker had run every test imaginable, and the results were always the same. Nothing wrong with her physically. Sometimes, the doctor had said with forced optimism, stress can be a factor. Perhaps take more rest, relax, stop trying so hard. Stop trying so hard? As if she could simply stop wanting to give her husband the one thing he needed most. An heir. A legacy. Proof that their bloodline would continue. That afternoon, as the royal cart rode her home, she couldn't wait to get to Lilith, her sister and best friend, to pour out her frustration, her fear, her growing certainty that Kale would leave her for someone more fertile. Lilith had always responded with hope and promises that everything would work out. What a fool she'd been. The cart had pulled up to the palace, and Arya had rushed past the servants, ignoring their greetings, desperate to lie down, to escape into sleep where failure couldn't touch her. She'd pushed open the door to her chambers, the room she shared with Kale, and found them. Her husband. Her sister. Tangled in sheets that still smelled like her lavender soap. Lilith's legs wrapped around Kale's waist, her head thrown back in pleasure, his mouth on her neck marking her, claiming her. They hadn't even noticed her at first, too lost in each other. Arya had stood frozen, her world crumbling, until a sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a scream. Kale had jumped up, scrambling for his clothes, his face flushed with guilt and something else, defiance. Arya, it's not. Don't. The word had come out deadly quiet. Don't you dare tell me it's not what it looks like. Lilith had sat up slowly, making no move to cover herself, her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's exactly what it looks like, sister. And I'm pregnant. 2 revelations in one breath, each more devastating than the last. The cage jerked to a stop, pulling Arya from her memories. Through the bars, she could see they'd reached a massive stone wall that stretched as far as the eye could see in both directions. The South Pack's border. Beyond it lay territory no northern wolf dared enter uninvited. The cursed lands, one guard muttered, making a sign against evil. The gates opened with a groan of ancient metal, and they passed through into a different world. The trees here grew twisted and dark, their branches reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. The air itself felt heavier, charged with wild magic that made Arya's skin prickle. They traveled for another hour before reaching the palace, and even in her misery, Arya couldn't help but stare. Where New Moon City's palace was all white marble and golden spires, this structure was carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Towers spiraled upward like the castle belonged in a nightmare, and torches burned with green flames that cast eerie shadows. Music drifted on the wind, drums and wild singing. Celebration. The Nova Festival, a guard explained, seeing her confused expression. They're celebrating the king's heir. First pregnancy to make it past 3 months in decades. Poor bastards think the curse is finally broken. They pulled Arya from the cage and her legs nearly gave out after 3 days of being cramped in that tiny space. Fresh chains replaced the old ones, these ones black iron instead of silver, and a guard shoved a rough brown dress at her. Put this on. You're going before the king. I thought I was sold as a slave, Arya said, her voice hoarse from disuse. You are. But even slaves need to be presented to the Alpha. He decides where you go, what you do. The guard's smile was cruel. If you're lucky, he'll send you to the kitchens. If not, well, there are worse places for a pretty thing like you. They marched her through corridors lined with tapestries depicting battles and bloodshed, past servants who stopped to stare at the new slave, their faces a mixture of pity and curiosity. The festival sounds grew louder as they approached a massive set of doors carved with wolves in various stages of transformation. The doors opened and Arya was pushed into a great hall filled with celebrating wolves. They danced and drank, toasting to the future, to the heir, to their Alpha. At the far end of the hall sat a man who could only be Alpha Darius Blackthorn. He was enormous, bigger than Kale, all muscle and barely contained violence. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, and his eyes glowed an unnatural gold even in human form. Scars crisscrossed his bare chest, each one a story of survival. He lounged on a throne of bones, genuine bones, and even from across the room, Arya could feel the weight of his power pressing down on her. Before the guards could present her, a commotion erupted near the palace entrance. A woman burst into the hall, her white hair wild around her face, her eyes completely white with no pupils or irises. She moved like wind, like water, like something not entirely bound by physical laws. Elder Soraya, someone whispered, and the crowd parted. The High Witch ignored everyone, her blind eyes somehow fixed on Alpha Darius. The concubine Sienna, she gasped. She goes into labor now. The curse, it rises again. For a moment the hall froze in perfect silence. Then Alpha Darius was on his feet, his celebration forgotten. No. Not this time. I won't lose another. He couldn't finish the sentence, just ran, his wolves parting before him like water. The crowd erupted into chaos, some following their Alpha, others standing frozen in shock. Arya stood forgotten in the confusion, still chained, still dressed in rags. This was her chance. She moved toward a side door she'd spotted, trying to blend into the panicking crowd. Her heart hammered against her ribs. If she could just reach the forest, she might be able to survive long enough to find sanctuary somewhere, anywhere but here. She slipped through the door into a dark corridor, running despite her bare feet and the chains that rattled with every step. Behind her she heard shouts, but she didn't stop. Left turn, right turn, following instinct and desperate hope. She burst through a door into the cool night air, into a garden that smelled like night blooming flowers and something else, something ancient and powerful. She'd only made it a few steps when someone appeared directly in her path. Elder Soraya stood bathed in moonlight, her white hair glowing silver, her blind eyes seeing everything. In her arms she cradled something that pulsed with ethereal light. "You," the witch said, her voice echoing with power that made Arya's wolf whimper in submission. "Please," Arya begged. "Just let me go. I've lost everything, I just want to be free." "Freedom." Elder Soraya laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Before Arya could react, the witch reached out with one hand and pressed it against Arya's stomach. Light exploded, Arya screamed and fate shifted. "What did you do?" she sobbed. "What did you do to me?" Elder Soraya smiled, her blind eyes reflecting the moon above. "I gave you what you always wanted. A purpose. 2 purposes to be precise. The Alpha's twin heirs now rest in your womb, saved from their dying mother, given to their true mother. The one who was always meant to break the curse." No, that's not possible. "I can't, I'm barren," the doctors said. "The doctors were wrong. You were cursed, dear child, cursed by the same dark magic that plagues our Alpha. But curses can be broken, transferred, transformed. And yours just became your salvation." The witch began to fade, literally disappearing into the moonlight. "Remember, Arya of the North, broken queen, future mother of the South's salvation. What was stolen can be reclaimed, what was lost can be found, and what was cursed can become blessed. Trust in the moon goddess. Trust in fate. And whatever you do, protect those babies with everything you have." Then she was gone, and Arya was alone in the garden, feeling her body transform in ways she'd never experienced before. Life growing inside her, 2 hearts beating in rhythm with her own. Impossible. Terrifying. There. A shout destroyed the moment. Guards rushed into the garden, grabbing her roughly. The new slave trying to escape. "Alpha will have your head for this, girl." They dragged her back through the palace, through corridors now silent and somber. The celebration had ended. As they passed a window, Arya glimpsed a covered body being carried on a stretcher, and she knew. The concubine Sienna. Dead like all the others before her. Dead with what everyone believed were the Alpha's children still in her womb. Only Arya knew the truth now. Those babies lived, growing impossibly fast inside a womb that had been empty just moments before. They threw her into a cell deep beneath the palace, stone walls slick with moisture, the air thick with the scent of old suffering. Hours passed, or maybe days, Arya couldn't tell in the darkness. She curled around her stomach protectively, feeling those twin heartbeats, wondering if she'd gone insane. Maybe this was all some elaborate breakdown, her mind's way of coping with losing everything. When the cell door finally opened, Alpha Darius filled the doorway like a living shadow. His grief radiated from him in waves that made Arya press back against the wall. She'd never seen such raw pain in someone's eyes. "You tried to escape," he said, his voice dead empty. "On the night my concubine died. On the night I lost my children, my only chance at an heir, you dared to run. By Lord, I—" Silence. He moved faster than should be possible, grabbing her throat and lifting her off the ground. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf surfacing in his rage and grief. "You will pay for that disrespect. You will suffer as I suffer. You will know what it means to lose everything." Arya clawed at his hand, unable to breathe, darkness creeping into the edges of her vision. Just as she thought she would die, he dropped her. She collapsed, gasping, her hands instinctively protecting her stomach. "You're my personal slave now," Alpha Darius announced. "You'll serve me directly. Fetch my meals, clean my chambers, attend to my every need. And every time you fail, every time you show even the slightest defiance, you'll be punished. Do you understand?" Arya nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. "Good. Your first task begins at dawn. Until then, think about your mistakes. Think about how you'll pay for them." He left, slamming the door behind him, and Arya was alone again with her impossible secret. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell designed specifically for her suffering. Alpha Darius made good on his promise. She fetched his meals 3 times a day, carrying heavy trays up endless flights of stairs. She cleaned his chambers, scrubbing floors until her hands bled, washing his clothes and changing his bedding while he watched with cold, judgmental eyes. And the palace's other inhabitants quickly learned she was fair game. The concubines were the worst. Beautiful women who'd shared the Alpha's bed, who'd tried and failed to carry his children, who now saw Arya as something beneath their notice. They tripped her in corridors, dumped dirty water on freshly cleaned floors and blamed her for the mess, stole her meager rations and laughed when her stomach growled during their elaborate meals. Lady Seraphine, the Alpha's current favorite, seemed to take special pleasure in Arya's suffering. "Look at the northern whore," she'd announce whenever Arya entered a room. "Couldn't keep her own king satisfied, so they sent her to us. I heard she's barren. Completely useless as a woman." The other women would laugh, and Arya would bow her head and continue her work, biting her tongue until she tasted blood. The male wolves were no better. They made crude comments about her body, propositioned her in darkened corridors, reminded her constantly that she was property now, that nobody would care if something happened to a slave. Through it all, Arya's stomach grew. Slowly at first, so slowly she could hide it beneath loose clothing. But the babies inside her were different, accelerated by magic, growing faster than normal wolf pups. By the 4th week she looked 3 months pregnant. She bound her stomach, wore layer upon layer of clothes despite the summer heat. At night, in her tiny servant's room, she would press her hands against her belly and feel them move, these impossible children who shouldn't exist. "I'm sorry," she would whisper. "I'm so sorry you're trapped in this nightmare with me." Alpha Darius remained cruel and mean, finding new ways to make her suffer. When she spilled wine on his papers, he made her kneel on hot coals for an hour. When she arrived 3 minutes late with breakfast, he threw the entire meal against the wall and made her clean it up with her bare hands while the food was still burning hot. But worse than the physical punishment was the emotional torture of watching him with his concubines. He flaunted them, bedded them loudly in the rooms adjacent to where Arya worked, made sure she understood that she meant nothing, that she was less than nothing. It was during one such night, while Arya scrubbed the floors outside the Alpha's chambers and listened to him entertain Lady Seraphine, that Elder Soraya appeared again. The witch materialized from shadows, her blind eyes somehow finding Arya's instantly. "Why haven't you told him?" she demanded without preamble. "Told him what?" Arya whispered, though she knew exactly what the witch meant. "About his children. About the prophecy. About the fact that you carry the only heirs he'll ever have." Arya's laugh was bitter. "Because he wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was trying to manipulate him to gain favor. He'd probably kill me for daring to lie about such a thing." "The babies grow strong," Elder Soraya observed, reaching out to hover her hand over Arya's bound stomach. "Much faster than normal. They'll be impossible to hide soon." "I know. And when he discovers you hid this from him, when he realizes you let him torture the mother of his children." Arya met the witch's blind gaze with defiance. "Then I suppose he'll kill me anyway. At least the babies will have had some time to grow strong first." Elder Soraya studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're braver than I gave you credit for. But bravery won't save you if you're dead. 3 more days. In 3 days I'll reveal the truth. Be ready." The witch vanished, and Arya was left alone with her fear and the sounds of the Alpha with his concubine. 3 days later, Arya woke to the sound of commotion in the palace. She dressed quickly, layers and layers to hide her now obviously pregnant belly, and hurried to the Alpha's chambers with his breakfast. She found him surrounded by advisors, all talking at once about crop failures and border disputes. He looked exhausted, his grief for Sienna still etched into every line of his face. When he saw Arya, his expression hardened. "You're late," he snapped. "I apologize, my lord. The kitchens. I don't want your excuses." He stood towering over her. "I think it's time we discussed more severe consequences for your constant failures." Before Arya could respond, the doors burst open and Elder Soraya swept in, her presence immediately commanding every eye in the room. "Alpha Darius Blackthorn," she announced, her voice ringing with power. "I come bearing news of your heirs." The room fell silent. Darius went pale. "My heirs are dead. Buried with their mother." "No." Elder Soraya pointed directly at Arya. "Your heirs live. Twin pups, growing strong in the womb of your fated mate, the one prophesied to break your curse. The one you've been torturing for weeks out of misplaced grief." Every eye turned to Arya. She stood frozen, the breakfast tray trembling in her hands. "That's impossible," Darius said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's northern, she's barren, she's..." The one born under 2 moons, marked by betrayal, womb empty but now filled with the true heirs of the South Pack. Elder Soraya moved toward Arya, gently taking the tray from her shaking hands. "Show him, child. Show him the truth." With trembling fingers, Arya began to remove the layers of clothing. 1 shirt, 2, 3. The bindings around her stomach. When she finally stood in just her thin underdress, her pregnant belly was impossible to deny. The room erupted. Advisors shouting questions, concubines gasping in shock and fury. But Arya only had eyes for Alpha Darius. He stared at her stomach like it was a ghost, his face cycling through disbelief, hope, rage, and something else she couldn't name. He moved toward her slowly and Arya flinched, expecting violence. Instead he dropped to his knees before her, his hands hovering near her belly but not quite touching. "How?" he whispered. "The night Sienna died," Elder Soraya explained, "I foresaw her fate. The babies were perfect, healthy, but the curse would kill them along with their mother. So I did what the prophecy demanded, I transferred them to their true mother. To Arya. She conceived them the moment she stepped onto South Pack lands, the moment fate brought her to where she always belonged." "Twins?" Darius asked, his voice breaking. "Twins," the witch confirmed. "A boy and a girl, strong and healthy, protected by both northern and southern bloodlines, conceived in magic and delivered by destiny." Darius finally looked up at Arya. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. "Would you have believed me?" she asked simply. "You were so consumed by grief, so determined to make me suffer. I was just trying to survive long enough for them to be born." He stood slowly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Arya saw him as something other than her tormentor. She saw his pain, his loneliness, the weight of decades of failure and loss pressing down on him. "Elder Soraya," he said without taking his eyes from Arya, "what needs to happen now? For the curse to be completely broken, for the children to survive their birth, you must marry her. A true marriage, recognized by Pack law and blessed by the moon goddess. Only then will the prophecy be complete." "Marriage?" Lady Seraphine shrieked. "To a northern slave? To Barren refuse that." "Silence." Darius's command cracked like a whip. "You will keep that hole in your head shut, or I'll do it myself." Seraphine's mouth snapped shut, her face purple with rage. Darius turned back to Arya, his expression unreadable. "For my children," he said flatly. "I'll do what must be done for my heirs. But don't mistake necessity for anything else." The words stung more than Arya expected. She'd known he didn't care for her, but hearing it stated so baldly in front of everyone made her chest ache. "I understand," she replied, lifting her chin. "This changes nothing between us." "Good. Then we're agreed." He gestured to his advisors. "Prepare for a wedding ceremony. 3 days from now. Make it brief." The wedding was exactly as promised. Brief, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. Arya wore a simple beige dress adorned with crystals that barely fit over her pregnant belly. Darius stood beside her in formal armor, his face a mask of indifference. When the priestess asked if they took each other as mates, Darius's "I do" was perfunctory, obligatory. He didn't look at Arya when he said it. The moment the ceremony concluded, he turned to his advisors. "Move her belongings to the Luna's chambers. Ensure she has everything she needs for the pregnancy. I want daily reports from the healers." He spoke about her as if she weren't standing right there. "And me?" Arya asked quietly. "Where will you be?" "In my own chambers. You'll have the Luna's quarters to yourself." His golden eyes were cold when they finally met hers. "You're carrying my children. That makes you valuable, protected. But it doesn't make us anything more than what we are. 2 people bound by prophecy and necessity." He walked away without another word, leaving Arya standing in her wedding dress, feeling more alone than she had in the dungeon. The months that followed established a painful routine. Darius ensured Arya had the best care. Healers checked on her twice daily, servants attended to her every need, and her chambers were filled with everything a pregnant Luna could want. But Darius himself remained distant, clinical. He would visit once a day, always at the same time, always for exactly 15 minutes. He would ask the healers about the baby's progress, place his hand briefly on her stomach to feel them move, then leave without any personal conversation. He never asked how Arya was feeling, never inquired about her day, never treated her as anything more than a vessel carrying his heirs. The concubines noticed. They might not be allowed to harass Arya openly anymore, but they whispered loud enough for her to hear. "He doesn't even want her," Lady Seraphine would say. "Just the babies. Did you see him last night? He spent 3 hours in my chambers," another would boast. "He can't stand to be near his own wife." And it was true. While Darius was coldly courteous to Arya during his daily visits, he continued his life as if she didn't exist. He still entertained concubines, still held elaborate dinners she wasn't invited to, still made it abundantly clear that she was Luna in title only. Arya told herself she didn't care. She had the babies to think about, these 2 innocent lives growing inside her. She didn't need Darius's affection or attention. She just needed to survive long enough to bring them safely into the world. But late at night, when she lay alone in her enormous bed, feeling the twins kick and move, she couldn't help but feel the ache of loneliness. She'd gone from a loveless marriage with Cale to this. A cold arrangement with a man who saw her as nothing more than a convenient womb. It was 6 months into her pregnancy when everything changed. Arya had taken to walking in the palace gardens at night when she couldn't sleep. Her body ached constantly now, the twins growing heavier each day, and the fresh air helped ease some of her discomfort. She was sitting by the fountain, one hand on her massive belly, humming softly to the babies when she heard footsteps. She looked up, expecting a guard, and found Darius instead. He stopped short when he saw her, clearly not expecting to find anyone here. For a moment they just stared at each other in the moonlight. "I couldn't sleep," Arya said unnecessarily, breaking the awkward silence. "Neither could I." He remained standing, making no move to leave but not coming closer either. They sat in uncomfortable silence, the only sound the gentle splash of the fountain and the night insects singing in the garden. Arya went back to rubbing her belly, trying to ease the discomfort of the babies pressing against her ribs. "Are you in pain?" Darius asked suddenly. Arya glanced up, surprised he'd asked. "Just uncomfortable. They're running out of room in there." He nodded, then fell silent again. But he didn't leave. Another few minutes passed. Then, without warning, Arya gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Darius was beside her in an instant, his carefully maintained distance forgotten. "What's wrong? Is it the babies?" No, they're fine," Arya assured him quickly. "One of them just kicked really hard. Right in the ribs. It happens when—" She stopped mid-sentence as she looked at his face. For the first time since the revelation of her pregnancy, Darius looked genuinely concerned. Not the clinical concern of an alpha worried about his heirs, but real human worry. His hand hovered near her belly and his eyes searched her face. "Are you certain you're all right?" he pressed. "I'm fine," Arya said softly. "Just very pregnant." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile but had forgotten how. The expression vanished as quickly as it came, but Arya had seen it. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her belly. Arya nodded, and Darius placed his large hand against her stomach. Almost immediately one of the twins kicked hard against his palm. "They're strong," he murmured, something like wonder in his voice. "Too strong sometimes," Arya replied wryly. "This one here," she moved his hand to the left side of her belly, "likes to practice what I think are going to be very powerful kicks when he grows up. And this one," she moved his hand to the right, "prefers to jab me in the ribs at 3 in the morning." "He and she," Darius corrected quietly. "A boy and a girl." "Yes. Though sometimes I think they're both boys with how much they fight for space in there." This time Darius definitely almost smiled. The expression softened his harsh features, made him look younger, less haunted. They sat like that for several minutes, his hand on her belly, feeling the babies move and shift. It was the longest Darius had stayed with her outside of his obligatory daily visits, and the most personal moment they'd shared since ever, really. "Why are you really out here?" Arya asked softly. "You could have turned around when you saw me." Darius was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I dream about them sometimes. About Sienna. About all the others. The women who died carrying children that never survived." His voice was rough, raw. "Tonight was particularly bad. I needed air." Arya felt her heart constrict. This powerful, terrifying alpha suddenly seemed very human, very vulnerable. "They're going to be fine," she heard herself say. "The babies. I can feel it. They're fighters, both of them. How can you be so certain? Because they're yours. The words came out before Arya could stop them. The fearless alpha of alphas. Darius looked at her, then really looked at her, and something shifted in his golden eyes. You're not afraid of me. It wasn't a question, but Arya answered anyway. I was. When you choked me in that cell, when you made me kneel on hot coals, when you treated me like I was less than nothing. I was terrified. She met his gaze steadily. But pain does a lot to people. Turning them into monsters sometimes. Right now you're just a father worried about his children. And that man I'm not afraid of at all. Silence fell between them again, but this time it was different. Less uncomfortable, more contemplative. I was cruel to you, Darius said finally. Unforgivably cruel. I tell myself it was grief, that I wasn't in my right mind, but the truth is I took my rage and pain out on an innocent woman because she was there and I could. Yeah, you were an ass. They both chuckled. Well, despite everything you are still alpha. And because... She hesitated. Because I understood your pain. I know what it's like to lose everything, to have hope stripped away again and again. Another kick from the babies interrupted the moment. This one was particularly strong and Arya winced. Here, Darius said, moving behind her before she could protest. Lean back. Arya hesitantly leaned against his chest, and his hands came around to support her belly, taking some of the weight off her lower back. The relief was immediate and profound. Better? He asked, his voice close to her ear. Much, Arya admitted, trying to ignore how warm he was, how solid. How safe she felt for the first time in months. They stayed like that as the moon traveled across the sky. Darius supporting her weight, Arya cradled against his chest, both of them feeling the twins move and kick between them. Neither spoke, but something unspoken passed between them in that garden, something that felt dangerously like understanding. It's late, Darius finally murmured. You should rest. He helped her stand, his hands gentle, and walked beside her back to the palace. At the door to her chambers they paused. Thank you, Arya said softly. For tonight. For staying. Darius nodded, then turned to leave. But he stopped after a few steps and looked back. I'll come earlier tomorrow. For the daily check. We could... About the babies. About names, perhaps. I'd like that, Arya replied, her heart doing something strange in her chest. After he left, Arya stood in her doorway for a long moment, her hand on her belly, feeling the echo of his warmth against her back. The next morning, Darius arrived an hour earlier than usual. The healers examined Arya as always, but when they left, Darius didn't immediately follow. You mentioned names, he said somewhat awkwardly. I did. Arya gestured to the chair beside her bed, and after a moment's hesitation he sat. Have you thought about what you'd like to call them? I hadn't let myself think that far ahead, Darius admitted. Every other time planning for the future felt like tempting fate. And now I'm trying to believe that maybe, just maybe, fate is finally on my side. He looked at her. What about you? Any preferences? They spent the next hour discussing names, debating options, sharing stories about their own naming traditions. It was the longest conversation they'd ever had, and by the end they were almost smiling at each other. This became their new routine. Darius would visit earlier, stay longer. Sometimes they'd discuss the babies, sometimes pack matters, sometimes nothing of consequence at all. The conversations grew easier, more natural. The distance between them began to shrink. The concubines noticed the change and intensified their efforts to drive a wedge between the alpha and his Luna. But Darius started declining their advances, spending his evenings in the library or the gardens instead. Walk with me? He asked one evening when Arya was struggling with restlessness. They walked slowly through the torchlit gardens, Darius matching his pace to her waddling gait. When Arya stumbled over a loose stone, his hand shot out to steady her and stayed there, warm against the small of her back. I can't believe I have 2 more months of this, Arya groaned. I feel like a beached whale. You're beautiful, Darius said suddenly, then looked surprised at his own words. Arya stopped walking, staring at him. What? You're beautiful, he repeated more firmly. Pregnancy suits you. You glow. I sweat constantly and my ankles are the size of melons, Arya countered, but her cheeks flushed pink. Still beautiful. His thumb traced small circles on her back. A gesture that felt intimate, intentional. I should have said so before now. They resumed walking, but something had shifted again. The touches became more frequent. His hand guiding her over uneven ground, his arm around her waist when she tired, his fingers brushing hers when they sat together. It was during one of their evening walks, about 7 months into Aria's pregnancy, that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. They were admiring the roses when a sudden summer storm rolled in, the sky opening up with torrential rain. Darius grabbed Aria's hand and they ran, laughing despite the downpour, toward the nearest shelter, an old stone gazebo covered in climbing vines. They collapsed inside, both soaked through, breathing hard. Aria's dress clung to her pregnant belly, and Darius's hair hung in wet ropes around his face. Their eyes met and suddenly they were both laughing, really laughing at the absurdity of it all. So much for a peaceful evening stroll, Aria gasped between giggles. The moon goddess has a sense of humor, Darius agreed, trying to wring water from his shirt. The laughter faded slowly, leaving them standing close together in the small space, the rain drumming on the roof above them. Water dripped from Darius's hair onto his face, and without thinking, Aria reached up to brush it away. Her hand froze halfway there as she realized what she was doing, but Darius caught her wrist gently, keeping her hand near his face. Aria, he said softly, and she heard something new in his voice. Something warm and uncertain and terrifying. Yes. I need to tell you something. I should have told you weeks ago, but I'm a coward who's forgotten how to feel anything good without waiting for it to be taken away. He took a shaky breath. I'm falling for you. Maybe I already have fallen. I don't know when it started, maybe that first night in the garden when you weren't afraid to be honest with me, or maybe when you risked yourself to save my life, or maybe it was the first time you smiled at me like I was someone worth smiling at. But somewhere along the way you stopped being just the mother of my children and you became everything. Aria's breath caught. Darius. I know I have no right to your affection. I was monstrous to you. I hurt you in ways I can never take back. But I need you to know that these past few months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness and your fierce protectiveness over our babies, I've fallen completely and irrevocably in love with you. His hand cupped her face. You don't have to say anything. You don't owe me anything. I just needed you to know. Aria stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the rain. This man who'd been her tormentor, her husband in name only, her distant protector, was looking at her like she hung the moon in the sky. You're an idiot, she whispered. Darius's face fell and he started to pull away, but Aria grabbed his shirt, holding him in place. You're an idiot, she repeated, because I've been falling for you too, and I've been terrified of it. Terrified that I was just convenient, that once the babies were born you'd go back to your concubines and I'd be alone again. Terrified that my heart would break the way it did with Kale, except worse, because despite everything, despite the scars you left on me, I was starting to care for you. Starting to care? Darius's voice was rough with hope. Fine. More than care. Much more than care. She looked up at him, rain-drenched and vulnerable. I think I'm in love with you too, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever felt. Why terrifying? Because loving you means trusting you with the parts of me that are still broken. It means believing you won't hurt me again. It means risking everything when I've already lost so much. Darius pulled her closer, careful of her belly between them. I swear on these children, on my pack, on my very soul, I will spend the rest of my life earning that trust. I will never hurt you again. I will love you and protect you and cherish you the way I should have from the beginning. Those are big promises. I'm a man who's learned the hard way that the most precious things in life are worth any promise, any sacrifice. His forehead rested against hers. You and our children are my second chance at life, Aria. I won't waste it. Then don't, she whispered. Don't waste another second. Darius kissed her then, soft and gentle and filled with all the emotion they'd been holding back. It wasn't their first kiss, that had been at the wedding, perfunctory and cold. This was their real first kiss, the one that mattered, the one that sealed something genuine between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Aria laughed softly. What? Darius asked, smiling against her hair. We're both soaking wet. I'm 7 months pregnant, and I think this might be the most romantic moment of my life. Mine too, he admitted. Though I had pictured something more dignified when I finally confessed my feelings. Maybe rose petals and candlelight. This is better. This is real. She kissed him again, quick and sweet. This is us. They stayed in that gazebo long after the rain stopped, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. When they finally returned to the palace, Darius walked Arya to her chambers but didn't leave at the door. Stay. Arya asked softly. Are you certain? We're married. We're in love. I'm carrying your children. I think we've done things rather backward. Don't you think it's time we actually shared a bed? Darius's laugh was warm and genuine. When you put it that way. That night, for the first time, Arya didn't sleep alone. Darius held her, his body curved protectively around hers, his hand resting on their children. And when she woke in the morning to find him still there, watching her with such tenderness in his eyes, she knew that despite the terrible beginning, they'd somehow found their way to something real. The palace noticed the change immediately. The Alpha King smiled now. He and his Luna walked hand in hand through the corridors. They were seen laughing together in the gardens, stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. The cold, distant arrangement had transformed into something that made even the most cynical courtiers believe in love. The concubines were dismissed, every single one of them. Darius didn't need or want them anymore. You're all I want, he told Arya one night as they lay in bed, his lips against her swollen belly. You three are my entire world. Lady Seraphine tried one last time to cause trouble, spreading vicious rumors about Arya using witchcraft to ensnare the Alpha. Darius's response was swift and brutal. Banishment from the South Pack, never to return. No one dares to speak ill of my mate, he declared to the court. No one questions her place beside me. She is your Luna, your queen, and she will be treated with the respect she deserves. Any who disagree are free to leave my lands. No one left. Instead, they began to see what their Alpha saw. A strong, kind woman who'd survived betrayal and torture and emerged with her spirit intact. A Luna worthy of their respect. Arya bloomed under Darius's love and the pack's acceptance. The haunted look in her eyes faded, replaced by genuine happiness. She laughed more, smiled freely, and the love between her and Darius became the stuff of legend in the South Pack. 2 months later, on a night when the moon hung full and bright in the sky, Arya went into labor. Darius never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and love and promises that everything would be all right. I'm here, he kept saying. I'm right here. You're the strongest woman I know. You can do this. When the babies finally arrived, their cries strong and healthy, filling the birthing chamber with sound, Darius wept openly. A boy with his golden eyes and a girl with Arya's dark hair, both perfect, both alive. The curse is broken, Elder Soraya announced from where she stood watching. The prophecy is complete. The South Pack has its heirs, born of love and sacrifice and destiny. Darius held both babies carefully, staring at them with wonder, then looked at Arya with such profound love that it took her breath away. Thank you, he whispered, for surviving. For giving me these perfect children. For loving me when I didn't deserve it. For being you. We're a family now, Arya said softly, reaching out to touch first one baby's face, then the others. A real family. We are, Darius agreed. And I promise you I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret giving me this chance. What should we name them? Arya asked, exhausted but happy. They looked at each other and smiled, remembering that first real conversation months ago when they discussed name possibilities. Cashin, Darius said, touching his son's tiny hand. Strong and noble. Luna, Arya added, stroking their daughter's soft hair. For the goddess who brought us together. Perfect, they said in unison. As the sun rose over the South Pack, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, a new era began. The cursed Alpha King had found love with his broken queen. The heirs that would unite their fractured world had been born. And two people who'd started as enemies had become the truest of partners. In the distant north, Kale sat in his study when Dr. Zucker burst in, face ashen. My lord. Lady Lilith, he stammered. Alpha Kale grew impatient. Speak like a man, doctor, he commanded. The child isn't yours, Dr. Zucker finally let out. She was already pregnant when she came to your bed. His little pup Marcel had been falling sick every new moon. As New Moon City medicine practice required, a father's blood could cure his child of any ailment. Kale was more than willing to do anything for his child. So he ordered Dr. Zucker to do the needful. Except that Marcel was never his son. The words hit Kale like a physical blow. What? It seems that you're unable to father any child. What? Kale growled. All along it was you who couldn't produce heirs, Dr. Zucker confirmed. The room was spinning too fast. Alpha Kale, leader of the northern city, impotent? Within the hour the council reconvened. Lilith entered smiling, her newborn nestled in her arms, unaware of the trap closing around her. Tell them who the father really is, Kale demanded, throwing the paternity results on the table. Lilith's face went white. That's a lie. Guards, bring in Bastion. The beta was dragged in, immediately crumbling. She said once she became Luna we'd be together. She said Arya was in the way, had me plant the wolfsbane in her chambers. Shut up. Lilith screamed. So you admit it, Kale said coldly. You framed Arya. You seduced me with another man's child. Lilith's mask shattered. So what? Arya was weak, failing at her one job. I did what needed to be done. I'd do it again. The chamber fell silent in horror. Under pack law, the child is illegitimate, Elder Varric pronounced. And Lilith's crimes warrant exile. I'll bring Arya back, Kale said desperately. I'll beg her forgiveness. I'm afraid that would be impossible. Your Barren Luna now mothers 2 children for the Alpha of Alphas. The news is everywhere, one of the elders confirmed. Murmurings erupted in the room. No one could believe it. A discarded Luna had stolen the heart of the feared King Darius. Kale collapsed into his throne. Arya wasn't suffering. The woman he loved once had become a beloved queen, given birth to the heirs he'd failed to give her, found love with a man who actually deserved her. What consequence should you face? Elder Mordecai asked quietly. You condemned an innocent woman based on lies. Kale removed his alpha medallion. I stepped down. I'm unfit to rule. I failed Arya, failed this pack. I don't deserve to lead. The council voted unanimously. Lilith was exiled, dumped at the border with nothing but a single bag and her illegitimate child. That night, alone in his chambers, Kale wept like a wounded dog. His whispers came out like chants. I'm so sorry, Arya. I hope he gives you everything I was too blind to see you needed. In the south, Arya slept peacefully beside Darius, their twins nestled between them, completely unaware that the man who destroyed her life had finally gotten exactly what he deserved. Nothing. I love you, Darius whispered that night as they lay together with their newborn sleeping between them. I love you too, Arya replied. My alpha. My king. My heart. And in that moment, with her family surrounding her and love filling every corner of her world, Arya finally understood what Elder Soraya had meant that first night in the garden. What was stolen had been reclaimed. What was lost had been found. And what was cursed had truly finally become blessed. If you've made it this far, thank you for witnessing Arya and Darius's journey from darkness into light. Don't forget to like this video if Arya and Darius's love story touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for more fantasy romance tales that will make you believe in second chances and destined love. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we drop our next epic story.